I wasn't big enough to do. Did you know I finally earned my PhD in 2012? PhD in history. It took a while, but yeah, got it. Yeah, and when I had the stroke, the doctor knew. I told her I was a late bloomer, that I'd earned a PhD in 2012, and she said, that explains it. She said, explains it. She said,
But this is, I'm going to call this our 30th year of the L.E. Group Magnuson Lecture Series. Some of you were around when Ellie was here. She was a charming, delightful, very, very interesting and interested person. And over the years, we've tried to get speakers who can blend the technical side with humanities, literature, and things of that sort. And sometimes we've really knocked the ball out of the park, and sometimes we haven't come quite that close. But anyway, this is in honor of Ellie Magnuson. Dr. Connor can't be here. Dr. Magnuson can't be here. Dr. Connor is. They taught together for so long, they've almost grown together at the hip. Our speaker is Connie White. Connie and I arrived on this campus at the same time in 1972. If you look at all she's done in her private practice, 20 years as an OB-GYN, all kinds of boards, all kinds of activities, and then went to work for the state. She's worked for the state for 15 years. And I am really interested to hear what she has to say about childhood experiences. So if you will, Dr. Connie White.
Thank you, Dr. Bradshaw. That's very kind. I want to, again, I knew Ellie Magnuson well, and when Dr. Flashcombe and Nancy and Dr. Connor were my faculty members, I told told Nancy this morning, it's a good thing Dr. Magnuson's not here, because I would probably cry throughout the entire thing, and that would be really ugly. But I do want to recognize the Yellow Rose of Texas, Ellie Magnuson. I'm sure that's why those yellow roses are there, in her honor, and then her daughter and her grandchildren, and all the things that she has built here in Owensboro with all of us, and we are most grateful for that. So I came to Kentucky Wesleyan in 1972 on a honor scholarship. It was just called the Honor Scholarship then. And I didn't know that it was related to J. Graham Brown, and then a few years later I found out that people were supposed to pay it back. Anyway, it was kind of a mess. But the good part was my parents, and Fred Wright knows my parents, would have never been able to afford to send me to Kentucky Wesleyan or to any college other than a state school because of our income. But I got a $4,000 scholarship that paid my tuition for 4 years. And you know, when I was talking to Fred this morning, he said 35, something like that. So that's pretty remarkable. And I worked in the lab and graded tests and did whatever needed to be done to make some extra money to pay for room and board. And those 4 years here were amazing. I walked around campus this morning, and I won't go down History Lane, which I tend to, and very easy to do, but I walked past Massey Hall and look, I almost sat down, but I was afraid I couldn't get up, on the steps, because I remember we finally protested enough that freshman girls, they were girls back then, they are not girls, they are grown women when you get to college, but we were allowed, they started the night that we could stay out past 10 o'clock, because freshman girls had to come in at 10, the other girls could stay out till midnight. There was something about we would not get corrupted before 10 o'clock. So we all sat on the steps with our pillows and fell asleep on the steps of Massey Hall because we didn't have to go in until midnight. So that was a very big deal for us. It was a riveting time back then. So the Chem building wasn't there. I walked around the second floor today, even though I know that's not where the science department is, but just kind of feeling that vibe. But while I was here, I was a chemistry major, and the chemistry department took us on a field trip to Lexington. And we toured, not the medical school, not the dental school, but the other sciences. And so we toured the pharmacology department, and they were telling us that they were going to start this brand new department called the Department of Toxicology. And Dr. Chalky, who was, I didn't know, but he was like internationally known, was leading that. So I got my master's at UK after I finished here at Wesleyan, and then I got a bench lab job in the National Center for Toxicologic Research in Little Rock, Arkansas. It's where the U.S. government, and I'm looking at the lawyer in the group, where the U.S. government used to make anthrax bombs back when we weren't supposed to. And it was a little facility outside of between Little Rock and Pine Bluff. I think they just figured if something happened, nobody would notice out there. But and then Richard Nixon in '69 closed it and turned it into research. So FDA and EPA had that laboratory. So we had a division of mutagenesis, a division of teratogenesis, and a division of cancer. And we did research there. And it wasn't very long before I discovered that rats give me asthma. So by 3 in the afternoon, I was and had to leave. So I decided that was not a good career choice. And the people did not give me asthma, so I decided to go to medical school. And I got accepted to the University of Arkansas to medical school. And they said I could get in if I would declare myself an Arkansas resident. I did not go that far. I decided I checked my chances and applied to UK and U of L, and was fortunate enough to get accepted at University of Kentucky, where I did my undergraduate medical school, my undergraduate degree in med school, and then I did my residency in OBGYN at the other medical school. I married my husband for his Rupp Arena tickets. So that will tell you my loyalties. 41 years I've been paying. When somebody said, "Oh, you have free tickets," I said, "I pay for those tickets every day." So 41 years of paying for my tickets, and it has been a delightful life. So I had 20 years, as Dr. Bradshaw said, 20 years OBGYN in Frankfort, Kentucky. I had a partner, and within 3 months I discovered he was not a recovering alcoholic, but a practicing alcoholic. So I went into solo OBGYN for 3 years. I became a crazy person. And then my husband said, "Don't you know somebody that could come and work with you?" And I said, "I'm not working with anybody unless I know their kindergarten teacher." And then I thought, Arba, So Arba Kenner, I went junior high, we were in junior high together when her family moved to Campbellsville. She was 2 years ahead of me, so she graduated from high school, came to Wesleyan on an honor scholarship. 2 years later, I graduated from high school and went to Wesleyan on an honor scholarship. She graduated from Wesleyan with a chemistry degree and went to Vanderbilt and got her master's degree. I graduated from Kentucky Wesleyan and went to UK and got my master's degree. She decided to go to medical school. 2 years later, I went to medical school. 2 years later, she decided to go into OBGYN. 2 years later, I decided to go into OBGYN. So it kind of, it didn't have to be an astronomer to see that the stars were lined up that we needed to work together. So Arba came to Frankfort. We ended up with a 4-woman practice in Frankfort, Kentucky, and I did that for 20 years, and it was wonderful. But then when I was 55, I thought, if I'm going to reinvent myself, I better do it pretty quickly because nobody's going to want me when I get around to reinventing myself. So there was a state job at the Division of Women's Health, and so when they said, "We've got this job where you will be in charge of low-income women getting birth control, the Title X program, and breast and cervical cancer screening in all the health departments across the state of Kentucky." I was like, "They would pay you to do that?" I mean, what a deal! I was all in. So I went there, and then some things happened, and I left for a year and came back as the deputy commissioner for the Department of Public Health. Now, until recently, when I would tell people that, their eyes would glaze over. Mom's friends at church said, "Does Connie inspect restaurants?" And I said, "Well, I don't have that skill set, and the local health departments do that. The state health department doesn't do that." So, but now I can say, does anybody remember Dr. Stack? The governor's press conferences on COVID, bald guy, glasses, bow tie, and everybody goes, "Oh, I remember Dr. Stack." Don't they, Clay? It's like, oh. And I'm so proud to have Clay Horton here, your local health department director. He is his Green River District, did an amazing job down here for you. Dr. Stack was the commissioner of the Department for Public Health, so I'm the deputy commissioner. So I just make sure he did everything right, and so it worked out like it worked out. So that's what I've been doing in Frankfort for all these years, and I am retiring December the 31st. I'm strong on that, Clay. I had several people go, "Oh, you're going to change your mind." No, we're not going to change my mind. I actually, though, am going to talk today, and this is a huge public health issue, because adverse childhood experiences, and I can proudly talk about positive childhood experiences, have designed every one of us right here, and continue to design what happens, and even adult experiences can change what happens in our lives. And so I'm hoping that you will learn why and how this is important and how you can integrate it into your life. So this is my obligatory slide, although I'm not officially here on the business cabinet, and that's why my slides haven't been approved by the communications team. But this just kind of gives you an idea of what the Department of Public Health does. We do everything from inspect tattoo parlors to whole genome sequencing. So we have the public health laboratory. We do the rabies testing. We do testing that nobody else does. We do 53,000 newborn screening tests every year, and the confirmatory tests. We do chronic disease, diabetes, and I'm going to start leaving people out. We do diabetes and high blood and heart disease and stroke. We do hands. How many people know what hands is? Let's talk to Clay afterwards, because hands will change the trajectory of people's lives. It's a home visitation program that every health department, there is a brick and mortar health department in every county, in all 120 counties, and it is a HANDS program. It's a home visitation program with outcomes that will knock your socks off. We just need more people involved. And it is not financially based. I'm doing a Dr. Wada commercial now. It's not financially based. Anybody can be a HANDS family. First baby, fourth baby, doesn't matter. We've got WIC. Y'all heard of WIC? Women, Infants, and Children. So food supplementation and nutritional education for folks. We have Office of Vital Statistics, a birth certificate, death certificate. We do preparedness, so when there's a tornado or a flood or whatever, we have people there that are overlooking the public health work. The food safety, like I said, Clay's folks do the local restaurants. We inspect the Ragu plant, and the Jeff plant, and the food preparation kind of places. Environmental, radiation, I'm looking at Nancy, you know those little things they make you wear in the hospital to see if you've got too much radiation, and people eye roll and go, nobody checks this. Yeah, we do. Family planning, I talked about that. Oh goodness. It goes on and on. The breadth of this department, milk safety, we inspect the dairy farms. I mean, you know, the breadth of this is just pretty amazing. And if it works right, you do not know we're there. But if something goes wrong, it's like, what in the world happened here? So that's the group that I work with, and it's an outstanding group of people. But what is public health? Because I get that all the time. It's like, well, is it medicine, or you know exactly what it is? So I like to talk about the three sisters. So there were three sisters walking down the path by the river, somewhere down in the Owensboro, that beautiful convention area you've got, and they're walking arm in arm. And one of the sisters looks over and says, "There's a baby in the river." And she jumps in the water and grabs this baby and brings it to shore. And her other sister takes her shawl off, and they're drying this baby off that's crying. And then she looks up and goes, "There's another one." So she jumps in the river and gets the other one. And by the time she sees the third baby, a crowd has developed. And there's more and more babies coming down. People are forming arm in arm, and they're going out in the river, and they're bringing these babies in. And the two sisters are working, and they look up and go, "Where's our third sister?" And they turned around. She's walking away. And they said, "Sister, where are you going? Why are you not helping us here?" She said, "I'm going upriver to find out why babies are falling in the river." And that's what public health is. You know, sick care, we have sick care, we have health care in Kentucky, in the world. That's taking care of the babies in the river, getting them out and drying them off and make sure they're not hypothermic, and all the things that you do. But the people in public health are upriver going, "Why are babies falling in the river? This shouldn't be happening." So many things that happen to us in our health shouldn't be happening. You know, we can do better than this. But we have to figure out the root cause. Why is this happening? So, I forgot to do my little pictures. I'm sorry. These are our babies that are falling in the river. And we have to do better for those babies. And we can. We can when we're dedicated to it. So, objectives, you have to have objectives. Don't read those. I'm just telling you about ACEs and PACEs and how important they are and how they can affect your interaction with your family. In fact, I had somebody after one of these talks say, "Can I have your PowerPoint? I want to take it to Thanksgiving dinner and talk to my family." I said, "Sure, good luck with that." But it matters. It matters to that person that you see in the parking lot, or that person that's in front of you in the grocery store, or a family member that you go, "What in the world happened to you?" Not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you. And that's what ACEs and PACEs tell us. So give me some words. What do you see here? It's one of my favorite pictures in the world. What? Cute?
Love.
Love.
Play.
Play.
Interaction.
Interaction. Anybody else? Sharing. Diversity. Those are so sweet. And look at us. Like, didn't we used to be like that? You know, so what happened to everybody? When they started sweet, kind, sharing, loving, well, this is what happened. This is from the medical journal Newsweek. This is an old slide because you can tell how blurry it is, but this is a PET scan where they were looking at the brain. So think about if you're laying on a table and they kind of chop you here, so so you got the nose at the top, and those round circles are your temporal lobes. Those aren't eyeballs. Those are the temporal lobes of the brain. And then you've got the back of the head. On the left-hand side is a PET scan of a 2-year-old, a normal 2-year-old. I'm not sure how they determined that. But on your right is a PET scan of a baby that had been in a Romanian orphanage. And the babies in that orphanage were fed regularly, they were diapered, they were swaddled, they were laid down, and 2 hours later somebody came back and fed them and diapered and swaddled them. They weren't abused, physically abused, they had decent care, but their brains look very different. And their brains are different because there are lots of places where there are no neural pathways. And neural pathways are where all the neurons in the brains kind of hold hands to transfer messages. So that's where you learn things like empathy and compassion and control. And when those neural pathways don't get laid down in those first 2 years, then you've got a brain like this versus a brain like that, and they're going to function differently. So when you look at that 4-year-old and go, don't you have any empathy? Maybe not. Maybe that neural pathway didn't lay down. Babies before the age of 2 make 1 million neurons a minute. A minute. I looked it up last night because every time I do this talk, I think, I have to have remembered that wrong. So when my granddaughter was born, I would come in and pick her up and go, did you make any neural pathways today, honey? And she would, and I knew that was a yes because she was cared for, she was loved. She wasn't old enough to verbalize that, but she knew that was happening. And those neural pathways were laying down for her that would happen, that would help her trajectory of life. Now, adults can do that. We can act, our brains are still a little plastic, but if you put a child in a bilingual daycare center, they're going to be speaking Spanish or whatever the language is in a couple of weeks, a couple of days. I could buy Rosetta Stone or whatever the popular thing is. I could maybe order off a menu if I went to another country, but I could learn, just not that quickly. And if they're making 1 million connections a minute, then no wonder they learn so quickly and they lay down those new neural pathways. So, adverse childhood experiences. This all started with a endocrinologist back in San Diego. He was pretty full of himself. If you know the endocrinologist, that's usually the case. And he had a clinic for super morbidly obese patients. And he was going to help them with weight loss. And so he worked with these people. He saw them like every 3 days, and they did this and they did that, and they actually started to lose weight. And they were doing so good. He said, well, let's see you back in 2 months. And when they came back in 2 months, almost every single one of them had gained weight back. Well, he's feeling like a failure as a physician because this was about him. It wasn't about them, right? It was like, what did they not do that I told them to do? And he made this unique thought of, let me ask a question. And so he started talking to these people that he had not done before. And he found that almost every single one of them had been sexually abused as children. And when you've been sexually abused as a child, you want to blend into the woodwork. So what happens if any of you, I haven't done it yet, have lost some weight that you needed to lose, and you went to work and people say, oh, Dan, you look great. Oh, wow, Fred, you're rocking that sweatshirt today or whatever. Because they didn't need that. They didn't want that. They didn't want anybody looking at them. So they gained weight so they could go back to the walls. And that's when he published a paper on that. And somebody from the CDC called him and said, there's a guy here that's doing that same kind of work on heart disease. And they started looking at this. So they went to Kaiser Permanente, and this was in the 90s. And the Kaiser in the 90s was white middle-class people in California. That's who they insured back then. And so everybody in their 50s that came in for a yearly exam, they got mailed a paper survey for the students. That's like a piece of paper with little bubbles in it, and you get a pencil, and you fill the colors in, and mailed it back. And what they found was that they ask them questions about their childhood. Did any of these things happen to you before you were 18? And they found that if you answered yes to these questions, the more yeses you had, the more likely you had cancer, COPD, heart disease, diabetes, depression, history of suicide attempts. I mean, it's a dose response curve, and you're going to see that here in a minute. The higher your number was, the higher your chance of a long-term chronic disease and a behavioral health illness. So these questions, and there are 11 of them, and they cover childhood abuse and household dysfunction. We'll go into each individual question. These questions may be triggering. If I show you something that if you're not comfortable with, please get up and leave. And nobody will ask a question or think anything of it. But I have been in meetings where when we start talking about this is more than people can handle. And sometimes it's things they didn't even realize that they couldn't handle. So we have a thing called BRFIS. I know Clay knows what BRFIS is. Anybody else know what BRFIS is? I thought it was a country in Eastern Europe when I started working in the Department of Public Health. It stands for Behavioral Risk Surveillance Factor. It's a telephone survey the CDC's been doing since 1985, where you call and you do some kind of epidemiologic voodoo, where you do figure out who and how many people you need to call in what parts of the state to ask questions. We don't call all 4.2 million people and ask them if they smoke or if they've had a colonoscopy or any of those things. We do a representative sampling. So we added these questions to the BRFIS questionnaire that we do every single year. We've only done it every so many years, not every year. But these questions, and when I read this, Dr. Ruth Ann Shepard, and y'all don't know Ruth Ann, but that's Judge Shepard's daughter, and their daddy was on the Board of Trustees when I was a student here. When I talked to Ruth Ann about this, and like I said, this is 98, I was like, this doesn't happen to people. I mean, nah. I've grown up, didn't happen to me. I found out my ACE score is like -5 or something. I've never had any of these happen and can't fathom that these things happen to people. But before you were 18, did you live with someone depressed, mentally ill, or suicidal, a problem drinker and alcoholic, someone who illegally used drugs or abused prescriptions, someone who served time in jail, prison, or correctional facility, where your parents divorced or separated? Did your adults in your home ever slap, kick, punch, or beat each other up? Did anyone in your home ever hit, clap, slap, or kick you? And they didn't include spanking. I don't know why, but they didn't. Are parents in your home, did they swear at you, insult you, or put you down? Has anyone at least 5 years older than you ever touched you sexually? Adult try to make you touch them sexually? Or were you forced to have sex by someone 5 years older than you? Those are the 11 questions. So like I said, if you say yes, it doesn't matter if it happened every day of your life or just once. It's a yes. And that's just how they designed it at the very beginning. And what they found was, and here's the dose response curve. So this is smoking cigarettes. So on the left is 0 ACEs. You have a 16% chance of you being a smoker. If you had 5 or more ACEs, you had 41% chance of being a smoker. And I'm just going to go through these quickly. So here's the dose response curve for asthma. Those 11 questions help determine how much asthma you're going to have. These are depression rates. So 12% with no ACEs and 43% with 5 or more ACEs. And this one, as an OBGYN, I was very interested in because the first set of numbers are intercourse by age 15. The middle group is teen pregnancy. So if you've got 4 or more ACEs, you've got a 40% chance of having a teen pregnancy versus no ACEs. And that's about 16%. And the far right is teen paternity. So did you father a child when you were a teen? These are related to your average childhood experiences. The other thing that we've learned is, they call it a pair of ACEs. There's the average childhood experiences on the top, the tree, the thing everybody sees, all of those questions that we just asked. And then there's the adverse community environments. So you take your ACEs, and then if you live in poverty, if you live in violence in your community, you've got poor housing. We interviewed some women in inner city Louisville and asked them what they wanted from their landlords. And they said, if they would just keep the apartment up to code, they'd be really excited because there's cockroaches in their house. Lack of opportunity. If you know the very best job you can get is still not going to support your family, How much hope is there for you? And then if you add an ACE score on top of that. So community disruption, discrimination, weathering. Is anybody familiar with the term weathering? That is, and I'll give you a perfect example. They studied at Duke University. I don't like to say that out loud. My son-in-law graduated from there, but we pray for him. But they looked at women from Africa that came to Duke University and delivered. And they looked at maternity, morbidity, mortality, bad outcomes, or maternal death. And they found that these women had the very same numbers that the other white folks in their clinic had. But they watched these women over the years, and after they lived in the United States 10 years, their rates were the same, the poor outcomes, that the black women that they saw. And that's because when they lived in Africa, everyone was black. This was their culture, this was their place. But when they came to the States, every day, every minute, some kind of microaggression happened to them. Something was happening in their life. Walking into a department store and people watching you to see if you're going to shoplift. Nobody's ever done that with me. But that happens all the time. And over time, that's what they call weathering. And that affects your health outcomes. So if you look at your pair of ACEs, this is a really nice graphic, and I'm going to make it bigger in a minute. But this is a group called Bloom, Kentucky, and they took our birth information and put it in a very clever graphic. But they're looking at just Kentucky outcomes. And so if you look at adverse childhood experiences in Kentucky, you've got 18% of adults say they were abused as children, and that's 18% that say they were abused. That's not the numbers. You've got 28% were verbally abused. You've got 10% of Kentucky children and 13% of Kentucky adults had a family member in jail. When daddy goes off to jail, the 8-year-old is sure they've done something wrong, or daddy wouldn't have left. You know, those are the kinds of processes that are happening in that child brain as they're trying to develop those neural pathways. So these numbers are interesting, and Kathy is definitely welcome to share this with anybody. But Bloom, KY, something, org, I think it is. This is the, so in Kentucky, in our earth, it says, so 1 in 5 children in Kentucky have 2 or more ACEs. 40% of adults in Kentucky have 2 or more ACEs. So, like, this side of the room doesn't have ACEs, this side of the room has had 2 or more ACEs. And 11% of Kentucky adults, so more than 1 out of 10, have more than 5 ACEs. So, they're walking around pulling that little red wagon of ACEs with them. And those events affect how they react to you. You know, my favorite phrase used to be, what's wrong with you? You raised in a barn? You know, and some people weren't. And they act that way because that's what they know, that's what they've processed, that's how their life works. And if we don't recognize that and expect them to step up to my -5 ACE background, I was loved from the minute I was born. My mother had surgery to try to get pregnant with me. My daddy had a job. We owned a home before I was 4. I never missed a meal. I didn't get an Agner person in high school. I'm still scarred by that, but my father assured me I'd get over it. You know, I got to college. I was here. And if y'all were at that alumni dinner last night, you heard all of the amazing things that people on this campus did for them when they were here. I'm stopping there so I don't start crying. Dr. Bradshaw was telling me this morning about a faculty member when he was a junior in college, pulled him aside and said, what are you going to do with yourself? You know, and intervened and helped him get on that road, turning the light switch, he said. You know, I had all of those advantages. Why would I expect somebody with an ACE score of 5 to look and live in the same world that I do? And I can't. So the thing is not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you? And you don't ask them that out loud because that's rude. But you make assumptions and you work with that and you try to make, you know, people don't miss appointments in my office when I was in practice just to say, I'm going to piss Dr. White off this morning and be late for an appointment. They had a problem. Their car broke down. Their neighbor who's going to give them a ride didn't come. You know, the list goes on and on. We have to think about that before we actually reach out and react to people. So, seeking behaviors underlying adult diseases may actually be coping skills. So, I had a friend. Sometimes the problems that we see as healthcare providers are really ways for people to overcome bad experiences. She was one of the church ladies that packed the backpacks for the weekend for the kids at school so they could go home and they knew they would have food for the weekend. And this one little boy brought his backpack back every Monday. It was filthy. It had grass stains on it. There was dirt ground into it. It was embarrassing. And he would plop it back on the counter. She would clean it, get it all nice, pack it with food. He'd bring it back dirty. It was about her. How dare he be that disrespectful? I worked so hard. I'm volunteering my time. So one day she finally said, Joey, what in the world are you doing with your backpack? I'll give you a clean one and you bring back this thing and it's all trash. He said, oh, Miss Rogers, I figured it out. The first weekend I brought my backpack home, wherever they were in the house, ate all my food. So the next weekend, I got off the bus and I went around to the back of the house and I threw my backpack under the porch and they asked me where the food was and I said, well, they stopped doing that at school. And now I can crawl under the porch all weekend and have something to eat. And she put her arm around me and she said, you bring that backpack back any way you want to and I will assure that it's full of food and you know you're loved. So that's how you react to what is happening around you. My best example of this is I practiced for 20 years and as you can tell, I talk to Blue Street with my patients when they're in the office and I ask them questions every time. And they were public health questions, I didn't really realize that. But I ask every time, are you a smoker? Now, I knew this woman that I was seeing that day. I'd seen her for 5 years for her annual exam. I'd ask her that every year. Every year she said yes. And then I would go through my 32 things that I would tell patients that cigarette smoking does to your body. Because I didn't want any of my patients to ever say, well, Dr. White didn't ever tell me about that. And so, for some reason, it was a paper chart, had a pen. I put my pen down and I looked at her and I said, how old were you when you started smoking? And she said, 10. Now, hey, in Kentucky, it's not that unusual. And I said, oh, okay. What do you think prompted you to start smoking when you were 10? And she said, well, my daddy, and of course being a good physician trying to stay on schedule, I said, oh, you were trying to defy your father. And she said, well, not exactly. But my daddy really hated the smell of cigarette smoke. And if I smelled like smoke when he came in my room at night, he would leave me alone. And then she looked at me and said, Dr. White, I taught my 8-year-old sister to smoke cigarettes. I was a bad sister, wasn't I? Because when I told her those 32 things that this was doing to her body, I was saying, you taught your sister to smoke, and these 38 things are going to happen to her, and that's your fault. That's what she was hearing me say. That was so far from what I intended. But I wasn't listening because I wasn't asking the right questions. And I never thought I would hear these words come out of my mouth. And I said, you taught your sister to smoke and you were the best sister any sister could ever want. So now that you're 33, let's just talk about, are there things we might can do to help you cut down a few cigarettes a day? I was approaching it in a way I thought was being like that really good doctor. And I mean, I'm surprised the woman came to see me for 5 years because I was traumatizing her every time she walked in the door. And I wasn't saying I was saying, what's wrong with you? And said, what happened? And how can we make this better for you? So dismissing these coping mechanisms, bad habits, self-destruction, they are probably doing something way smarter than I would have ever figured out if I had been a kid in that setting. So, positive childhood experiences. It makes sense. If you had good things happen to you as a kid growing up, you're going to do better. Well, somebody's actually measuring that now. So it's not just, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. They're actually measuring things like, do you feel able to talk to, did you feel able to talk to your family when you were a kid? Did you feel like they were stood by you in difficult times? Did you feel safe at home? Did you feel a sense of belonging in high school? Surely nobody says yes to that. You felt like they belonged in high school, right? Did you feel supported by friends, though? Did you have friends that supported you? Were there at least two non-parent adults who took a genuine interest in you? I read that and I laughed out loud. I mean, Fred knows, in Campbellsville, everybody cared about you. And if you didn't do something right, they let your family know about it. You know, everybody knew you, they cared about you. I was surrounded by a church of love, even when I did bring my guitar and try to play at Sunday morning service. I got around that too. So that, and there's so many kids that don't have that. They don't have any adults that care about them. And did they enjoy participating in community events? These are the positive childhood experiences that they have measured. And what they found is, and this is one of the first papers, this was in 2019, I believe, positive childhood experiences in adult mental relational health, statewide sample, BRFIS, remember that country in Eastern Europe, they took about 5 states in their BRFIS questions that they asked. And what they found, there was a dose-response curve. The more PACEs, the better the adult outcomes. PACEs can mitigate negative mental health problems. So PACEs can buffer your ACEs. And then the thing that is even most interesting to me, that PACEs are critically important to positive mental health, even if you don't have ACEs. So if you've got ACEs, you've got bad mental health outcomes. We've seen that. If you've got PACEs, that makes it better. The next slide's going to show you that. But if you don't have any PACEs, if you don't have any, nobody's abused you, but nobody told you they loved you, that you were important, that you had agency, that you counted in this world, your trajectory is very similar to people with ACEs. And that surprised me, but when I thought about it, it really shouldn't have. So this is, everybody in this graph has an ACE score of 4. But on the left, the light lavender, those people have 0 to 2 PACEs in their life. The people on the far right, in the dark blue, have 6 to 7 PACEs in their life. I mean, that's a big difference between 60% and 20% when you're looking at poor mental health and depression. It mitigates, it makes a difference. And it makes a difference when you're 2, or whether you're 12, or whether you're a 20-year-old college student. It makes a difference. And that's why this place is so special, because we give PACEs. And those PACEs we give those young adults then ripple out to their kids and their grandkids and their friends' kids. It makes a difference. So we'll skip that. So here are our babies. Remember our 3 little sweet, adorable, sharing, loving, diverse babies? Look, they grew up. I found this picture. I'm not advertising whatever water they're selling, but those are our babies. And now they're bigger people. And how different are they now than when they were in that very first picture? Every child is one caring relationship away from a success story. And I think we can all agree with that. We could have agreed with that before, but I gave you graphs that showed you that that's true. So the take-home message is exposure to trauma and violence is the single most prevalent risk factor for our children today. Adversity is necessary for learning. If I had not had a test, I would have never learned organic chemistry. Trust me, I wouldn't have done that in my spare time. I had a test and I had to learn that stuff. So you have to have adversity to go, oh my gosh, I better study or I'm going to flunk. But if you have toxic stress, that disrupts life. That's different. Toxic stress is different. Relationships are necessary for resilience. The lifelong toll of unaddressed ACEs are perhaps the major cause of death and disability as adults, and we've shown that. Knowing what we know, and this is what I started with, we can do better at preventing, mitigating, and treating toxic stress. So this is from the Bloom folks, and they look at it a little bit, they're trying to sell this to industry. So they're looking at the financial side of this. So we know that health challenges and economic hardships happen as adults with high ACEs. We know there's a cost of health and vitality, and they looked at the ACEs scores from 15 to 20. 62% of adults have at least one ACE, 19% have 4 or more ACEs. And they've done math that shows that it costs Kentucky $295 million a year. When you look at lost work, absenteeism, mental health treatment, all the chronic diseases that we know that are triggered by high ACE scores. And by having more PACEs, we can buffer adversity, impacts of adversity, we can support families, build pathways to lifelong health, resilience, and community strength. So this is a phrase that's been used in a lot of ACEs talks, hurt people hurt people. I really don't like that. I don't know why, I just don't. Maybe it would be being ugly. That's what Fred and my mother would say, that's ugly. But what I like to say is build people, build people. You know, when you've got build people, then they know how to build other people. And that's what we all need to do. So in 1832, I don't know who this guy was. He's really famous and I can't even pronounce his name. But he said, and a lot of the history people know who that was, treat people as if they are who they can be, and you help them become who they're capable of being. And Frederick Douglass, with a little editorial comment by me, says, it is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men and women. So that's how ACEs and PACEs affect the trajectory. And so I was thinking about how to end today, and it struck me last night at the alumni meeting. And I've never done this before, but I want to challenge every single one of you. You don't have to raise your hand, but I want you to promise yourself that before Monday morning, so I know you're busy with the homecoming and everything, I want every single person to promise me and themselves they're going to think of somebody who is a PACE in their life, and they're going to write them a note. You can email them, but have you ever gotten that written note that says, thank you so much, you were special in my life and I appreciate that. That's all you have to say. That professor you had, all of those people. Do it before they're gone. And at my age, there's a lot of people gone. There's a lot of notes I wish I had written. We need to let those PACEs know how important they were. And then that helps us to know and recognize we're PACEs too, in ways you have no idea. I mean, I do talks with health department directors and to our health department staff, and you know, the staff that works in the health department, the way they check somebody in at the front desk and make them feel welcome and make them feel important. The way our nurses handle folks, our environmentalists, and the list goes on and on. People here at the university, people that work at the front desk, that answer the phone, that make those students feel important, and that make each other feel important. That very difficult staff member that you work with, that you just go, oh, it's Monday and Mary Ann's going to come in and it's going to be something. Well, it probably is, because we don't know what's happening in Mary Ann's life. So how do we treat Mary Ann so that Mary Ann knows that whatever it is, she's still loved, she's still supported, don't have to understand it, but that positive experience is what we're put here for. And we've got science to back it up now. So this to me is a real big public health issue. It's a issue of our religion. It's an issue of our country. And I just hope that putting this together in these pieces might be helpful for you to understand. So questions that anybody has, we have a few minutes. I know y'all need to get to the alumni, your big party at the president's house here in a few minutes. Or do you have questions about Dr. Connor or Dr. Flashcomb? We'll talk about Dr. Connor's office, the office of maximum entropy. Yeah, he's still cleaning up your office. Okay. Yes.
On the
Yes, I'll be happy to take questions. I will tell you that the first thing I did was I came in here to see if there were pews here. So the president doesn't know this, but I was here when this was the library. And they built the Tapscott, and they showed the drawings, and they had pews attached to the floor. And this was 1973, 4, and we threw an absolute mad dog fit. I said, it was like you are limiting what this space can be used for. This is a space that it is a chapel, and we want students to feel like they are welcome to come here. You put pews in here, ain't happening. So I was really happy when I walked in the door and saw chairs. So thank you to everybody who's kept chairs in here. Yeah. It sounds like a little deal to do. Yes, sir.
I just want your insights on. I actually like the phrase "hurt people," because I can see myself years ago being one of those hurt people who hurt people. But I really like the other phrase: build people, build people. But what do you think of a phrase that's making internet memes for a few years now? Be the person you needed. Be the person you needed when you were a child. Be the person that you needed when you were a child.
Be the person you need when you were a child.
Yeah. For those of us who have a few aces in our past.
Yes.
More. Yeah.
I probably don't like hurt people because I wasn't a hurt person. So I mean, that doesn't mean it's a bad phrase. I just don't identify with that. But I think you're right. I think we need to look back and say, what did we do to folks when we really weren't doing it to be mean? It just came out that way of how we had been treated. And I've seen lots of experiences where people, I don't know if you saw the Elton John movie, I don't even remember what it was called. I saw it on an airplane, but at the very end, he's in a focus group, and his little Bernard, was that his name? No, not Benny. Anyway, whatever his real name was. And the little boy just walks in the door and stands there in the middle of the circle. And he gets up and he goes over and he hugs that little him. And he said, I loved you even though nobody else did. And to me, that was like, it was a pretty amazing movie, but that was the most powerful part to me. He looked at himself and said, nobody loved you, but I love you, and I didn't love you back then. I was a goofy little awkward kid who played the piano, and nobody liked me, and I didn't like me. But when he finally liked himself because he was good to himself, I think that's very important. If we can't start by loving ourselves. Didn't somebody say love your neighbor as yourself? Wasn't that? Yeah, I think I read that somewhere. And we skip that as yourself part. Love your neighbor, but we don't talk about loving ourselves. And that's not selfish to do that. That's self-assuring. We have the right to be loved. We have the right to love ourselves and love other people. And I just think we missed that mark. Somehow we skipped that phrase at the end. And I just think we need to focus on that more. That's a good question. Yes, ma'am.
I'm worried about our refugees that come in. I've noticed, I knew part of this. And I hear from the children the problems that they have in school with other kids. And I can see the road.
Right.
And I'm hoping that enough community people will support them to reduce the number of cases.
The comments is our refugee population, and especially those children and how they're picked on. Everybody was picked on in high school. We all were, except for football players. Everybody loves them. And Fred again. But they got a special target on them. And I think we as adults making sure that kids know that we inject ourselves in those school settings. That last night I was shocked how many of the people that got awards coached Little League or did something, and they didn't even have kids that were Little League age, but they were still doing that because that put an adult, that trusted adult, doesn't have to be a parent, that trusted adult. They need to see that trusted adult. Even though there's a lot of things lined up against them, but they need to see those trusted adults in that community. And there's all kinds of opportunities that we need to search for to find that way that we can interject ourselves and say, I'm here, I think you're important, I want to spend some time with you, I want to build you up, because I think you deserve that. And that's about, I can't change policy, I can try, but I can't change a lot of things, but I can change those pieces. Okay. Anything else? We got 3 minutes. You can get 3 minutes back in your life. Thank you so much.